Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's expert interview with Claire Pace, the head of operations at BLab Europe. BLab Europe is a nonprofit organization creating a global movement of people who believe in the power of market-driven solutions to solve humanity's greatest challenges. Claire's going to talk about the important operational role HR plays in a nonprofit organization and how other purpose-driven organizations can join the B Corp movement. Welcome, Claire, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we start, could you give a short introduction of BLab Europe and your mission, as well as a little bit of information about yourself?
Sure. So BLab Europe, we're a not-for-profit, as you mentioned. We're an organization and we actually work with for-profit companies that are passionate about using business, so the business that they're doing, as a force for good. We're sort of working with those companies because we believe in a new kind of business, one that's sort of balancing purpose and profit at the same time. And I myself come from a HR and operations background. I actually, prior to working at BLab Europe, worked in more tech companies, but very similar sort of organizations and sort of working in small teams that are growing and setting them up from a sort of HR and operations perspective.
What is the role of HR in a nonprofit organization, and what are some of the more unique challenges that you face?
It's a good question. I think one thing that is no different in my eyes from a not-for-profit organization and a for-profit organization is that HR is essential. I think where you have people working, you need HR. I think what's the most challenging thing for a not-for-profit is you're working in usually quite small teams and sometimes with smaller budgets as well, and being very conscious about the financial decisions that you're making. And I think the other thing that we've seen from a BLab Europe perspective is that we've gone from a very small team, so 2-3 workers, and then in a year we've added about 15 people to that. So I see that as quite considerable growth. And it means that if you don't have a lot of these HR policies and practices in place, it can be kind of confusing for your workers because they don't know what they should do in certain situations and you don't have everything set up for them. So, platforms like Personio, that's a great example of using these sort of tools that can help you get some of these processes in place. But you really need to think as an NGO that it's essential to sort of have some of these things in place.
That makes complete sense to set it up right from the beginning. What are the requirements to become a B Corp, and what operational role does HR play in supporting this goal?
As I mentioned at the start, we have impact management tools, and one of those tools is called the B Impact Assessment. And that's essentially something that any company, for-profit company or not-for-profit, could also sign up and go through a very extensive assessment of their company. And it's basically assessing them. It's over 250 questions, and it's assessing them across 5 different areas, which essentially are the 5 different stakeholders of the company. So that's workers, customers, suppliers, community, and environment. And obviously workers being one of the core areas of the assessment is hugely related to HR. So essentially that section is based around making sure that your workers are satisfied and also thinking about the well-being of their workers as well. So there's a whole range of questions, as I mentioned, that it goes through, but you're looking at the practices that you've set up, things like pension programs, health and wellness incentives, any career development that you've set up, training programs, engagement and satisfaction, as I mentioned. So it's really important for companies to be thinking about this section. And I think HR is really a big section of that workers piece.
What advice do you have for NGOs that want to set up their own sustainable people operations?
It's really important to think about HR and think about the processes and the practices that you want to establish from the get-go, and make sure that you set aside the time and the resources to put the work into setting this up. I think as well, you need to think about the organization and think about your workers' needs, the employees' needs, and even asking them what they kind of would like to see from the organization, I think is really important. As well, it's important to sort of learn from others and find out what other NGOs are doing and get some ideas through them as well. We're sort of looking at different benefits we can offer from a climate perspective. So thinking about whether that's encouraging people to ride to work or take public transport instead of driving, or even giving extra holidays, paid vacations, so that people will take a train instead of flying to their next holiday. So little ideas like that I think match, we got those ideas from other NGOs that match our beliefs around climate and trying to make a better impact. So I think you can be very resourceful and find out what other organizations are doing and learn from them. Another important thing is to really prioritize and take things one step at a time. I think there's so much to do, especially around, people management and HR, that it can be sometimes overwhelming. And I think the thing is to just really think about what you need to tackle first and then slowly chip away at it, because you can't do everything overnight.
Well, thank you, Claire, for joining me today and those great insights. And if you found this interview helpful, be sure to check out the Personia YouTube channel for more video content on HR expert topics.